going to show you how to do some knitting, some very basic knitting, which you don't need much more than basic knitting, to be honest. I'm going to show you how to cast on, do some knitting, which is a type of stitch, even though it's called knitting, but knitting is a specific stitch, and purling, which is another stitch. Both of those two are really helpful, and how to cast off so that all of your wool doesn't unravel at the end, so that all of your piece does not all come apart. So to do that, I've got a few things here to kind of introduce you to the basics. I've got some what we're calling yarns today. We often call them wool, but wool is a very specific yarn made from animal wool. Yeah, that is it, animal, yeah, fur. Whereas some of it is acrylic, which these are actually. They look like wool, but they're acrylic, and so they've got plastics in them. So you might use them for different reasons. The main reason I'm using acrylic here today is because I do a lot of yarn bombing, or guerrilla knitting as it's known, where I might attach some of my knitting to some furniture outside, some street furniture. And if I use wool, it shrinks, and if I use acrylic, it doesn't. So you can throw it through the wash, you can get it outside and it doesn't change too much. Yeah, so that's that bit. Also here we have a range of needles. So this needle here, I don't think you'd be able to see this, but this is a 4.5 millimeters, it says on the little blue handle. And these are made of, I'd say aluminium, because they're very light. They make this kind of noise. They're very good to slide your stitches along. That's good. This one here is a 4 mil, so it's a bit smaller than this one. It's about the diameter. And these here are a 7. That's a big stitch that I'm doing here on this purple one. And here you can see that I have been doing, this here is knitting on one side and purling on the other. So if you knit a row and then purl a row, and knit a row and purl a row, I'll go through that in a minute anyway, you'll get this very smooth side on this side and a textured side on this side, and that's how you get that flat kind of look. If you do knit a row, purl a, no, knit, if you just knit every row, you get this section down here. And if you knit and purl, you get that section up there. So knitting on the top and purling underneath. Yeah, so you'll get that, but I'll show you how to do that. We're only going to do small pieces like this today, which are 10 stitches across. And we're going to count how many rows we do, so that we can keep an eye on what's what and see how many it takes to do what size of what, and what we're doing on different ones. And I've got a little piece of paper here, so when I do a row, I'm going to put a little mark as 1, and we can keep an eye on what we're doing. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take these needles, mainly because they're the ones that are available. I'm sending you in the packs, you should have 5s, which is slightly bigger than this one, but that's good because it means that you work fast and bigger, so you haven't got to be too tight. You can be quite easy going with it as a starting point. What we do first is we take our yarn and we put a little slip knot in it. And we want a slip knot in it so that it moves. I'm going to move these things out of the background so that you can see a little bit clearer. Well, hopefully anyway. So to make a slip knot, I go over my 2 fingers and throw the wool, the yarn, through that little round circle I've made, and pull it, but not too tight, because you want this to be able to still move, because you're going to put both your knitting needles into this hoop, and then you're going to pull it a little bit tight so that this tension, there's a lot about tension in, well, there's a lot about tension in life, but for knitting it's very important as well, is that we keep our tension kind of as consistent as possible. So if we've got loose tension, keep it loose, and if it's tight. But what you'll see over a piece of knitting, even on these pieces of knitting here, is where this was where I've made a purposeful hole, honest, But you can kind of tell where the tension changes a little bit, but as you do it, more practice you have, the better you get at consistent tension, and it'll make more sense to you. Don't worry about it too much right now. So we've put our one needle into the slip knot, and now we're going to put the second one in, and it goes behind the needle but through the stitch there. I'll show you from that angle as well, to that stitch. Now this little tail here, we need to keep that out of the way, so I'm just going to hold on to it as I do hold on to the needles here, and kind of keep myself aware that that is where it is. We don't need it, it's going to get cut off eventually, but we're not going to do that until we've got into it or come to the end, in case we need it to attach it to something else. So now in this hand we're holding the yarn that is attached to the ball of wool. So we've got this hand holding the wool and this hand holding the needle. This hand is always going to hold the needle, and this is the way that we always work. You might be left-handed, I'm right-handed, so my dominant hand is my right hand, so I'll always hold it in here. But if you are left-handed, you'll do it in reverse, and I am going to look at a way of maybe turning this film round so that that can happen, but can't promise anything. So with this hand we're going to take the yarn behind that back needle, in between the two needles, it's an anti-clockwise direction, through the stitch here, not through the stitch, in between the two needles, and then you're going to use the needle that's in your right hand to pull that piece of yarn that you've just put through those two needles together, and then we're going to place this on top of here, on top of this needle. So now we have two stitches. That's casting on. This is casting on. And we're going to do it again, so we're going to go through that stitch so that it is in between. So both of those needles are in that stitch, but one of your needles sits behind the other. Hold on to that tail again and take the yarn around the needles in between the two, pull it out and attach that one to there, and then gently with this hand pull that a bit tight, because that's so that it's sitting nicely on there, not so that it's really baggy like this, and not so that it's so tight that it won't move. I always like to put it out because we've also now got to get the needle in the back, through it here, through to the back, take your yarn and over the needle. Pull that yarn out that you've just put in. Oh, I've got a bit tight there, it's because it's pulled on another piece of yarn from another stitch. That's very bad behaviour of me. Look, I've left a little bit of, I've cut that. Right, so, but we're only practicing, we're only playing, so let's have a go. Over, anti-clockwise, pull this up, pop it onto that needle, put your needle in the stitch again, take the yarn around, pull that stitch out, go, and then through again, take the yarn around your needle, pull this needle through. It shouldn't be that tough like it's looking, it's because I'm catching little bits of this stitches from the previous ones I've cast on there. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I want 10 in total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Put my needle into that last stitch again, 7. Oh. 8 is going to come now through this bit here. We're going to pop that on there. This way a little bit. 9. And last stitch this should be for the casting on is 10. Now you can cast on many, many, many And your patterns, if you ever use one, will be telling you how many to cast on and what size needle and what size wool to use, because wool also comes in different plies. I think this is 2-ply. So, but it is 3-ply, 4-ply, 1, chunky. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 stitches on there, and they're cast on. We're now going to knit our first row. So I've cast on 10, and I've wrote that down on my little book over here. It's 4.5 needles, 10 stitches, and I've started with the word rows, and I'm going to add to that as I go along. I'm going to watch through the phone now, my knitting, because I think that's the best way for me to do it. So I'll go through this. We're going to do a row of knitting now. So we've got our 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And through stitch number 10 there, I'm going to call it number 1 from now on, but that's our first stitch. We're going to create a knit. So it's very, very similar to casting on. We put our needle through the stitch that you've made. So that's the cast on stitch. That's the old stitch. You're going to put your needle through there. And then as before, we're going to go around the back and over the front of that bottom needle so that the yarn is in between both there. And then we're going to push our needle through to make that stitch. Now, with casting on, we would pop it back onto this one. But now that we're knitting, we're going to put it onto this needle here, our right hand needle. It's quite difficult to do this for a little bit because you have to push your knitting right up, but without losing any other stitches. You only want to pop that top stitch off that you've just worked into. And that is it. That's your first knit. We're going to do it again. Knit, round, pull your needle through to get that yarn you've just put around. Take the old stitch off the top, into the old stitch, round with your new yarn. Pull that new stitch through and get rid of your old stitch off the top. In, round, pull so that you've got it on your needle, off. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, round, in, pull it up and off the top. Halfway now, push it into the old stitch, round, pull it up and off, into your old stitch, round with your yarn, round the back and in between, pull it up, and there's your stitch. Keep going. It's gone a bit fuzzy, this wall. So it does kind of look like one at some point, but we'll manage. Around, that's your last row on that row there. And so this is a knitted row here. Okay, I'm going to write down 1. On my book. And then we're going to turn this over so that our needle is, so where all the stitches are that you've just made, they're back in this left hand, your less dominant hand. And we're going to knit a row again. So we're in through the old stitch, holding on to that little tail still so it doesn't get involved in the knitting. Put the needle into the old stitch so it still goes around the back, holding onto the yarn with this dominant hand, round the back, over, in between the 2 needles, push it through and off the top, into this old stitch, take the yarn around and off. Now what you need to do is kind of check that this tension here is okay and it hasn't got some big bagginess to it. It looks okay for now. So into the stitch, round the back, through the middle of them, pull it forward so you've got your stitch on your needle and push the old stitch off the other needle. Into the old stitch, round and off. into this old stitch, round the back, but push the yarn into the middle of those 2 needles, pull it out and off with the old stitch. In, round, push through and off. In, round, push through, off. In, round, push through and off. And that's my second row of knitting. There it is. I'm going to move this out of the way a bit because I'm thinking it's upsetting the focus a tad. Now write down two rows, and then that also helps us be able to see what a knitted row looks like from either side. So at the moment it's not looking like much, but in a little while it'll start to look much more like a piece of fabric like this. Okay, let's go again, turn it round so that all of the stitches you've created are in this non-dominant hand. I don't need to worry about the tail so much because it doesn't get in the way up here. Now I'm going to push my needle into the stitch, still doing the same, into that stitch, making sure you don't go into this bit or this bottom bit. It's just attach the bit that is on the needle, so it's like a hoop, really, like that. And you are going in so that it's on both needles at the same time. Then you take your yarn around, make it go through the 2 needles so that this needle can pick it up there, and then you can push it off the other needle. So in, round, and if this happens, just calmly take your yarn away so it's single again. So in, round. The way to prevent that happening a little bit where the other wool gets involved is by the way that you hold your yarn in this hand. But sometimes, I don't know how I hold the yarn, it just starts to happen as I'm doing it. So we'll see. So needle in, yarn around, push, and now because it's got a little bit further down I have to push these up when I push them off. But just do it carefully and calmly, so that all of your stitches don't drop off your needle. And at this point, if they did, you'd just start again. If you'd done lots and lots of knitting, you'd have to retrace your steps and try and get it back in. The needle through all of the little stitches, and you just have to work out which way around they go. Ah, it sounds so easy. I find that very difficult. Right, and there is row 3 written down. I'm going to knit again. Now my tail is in the way again. Round the needle after you've gone in. Off. Through the stitch, round the needle, pull it up and off. Through the stitch, round your needle in between so that that one holds it up. Okay, I need to push my stitches up a little bit but still hold on to them. Push that off the top. That's the next knitted row. Okay, and you can start to see now that knitting looks like this. The texture on both sides. Now it's in the right hand over here, which is the left hand, the correct hand. We're going to do another 2 rows, and then I might do some purling so you can see the difference in how to do that. So knitting into the old stitch, around with the new yarn, in between the 2, pull it up. Another row of knitting. Round, pull that stitch through, push that off, in, round, push that stitch off. You do get sometimes a little bit of pain here on your fingertip from pushing this, or if you push it that way, especially if your tension's tight or you've got lots of stitches and they're very small. I'm going to do this from this angle, look. Around there, down there, pull that through and push that off, that's it. So into the stitch, around, so it goes in between the two needles, off, into the stitch, around, so you can see it in there, off, and last stitch, around the needle, off. So I've got 6 because I counted them, not tallied them up, and I've got 6 stitches and 6 knitting rows. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can start to understand how it is. It's taken me a long time to do that. I've knitted since a child, but it's taken me a long time to recognise what they look like. Or need to. That's what it is. I've been doing more guerrilla knitting and yarn bombing, so I've actually been putting words into my knitting, so letters and words as I go along. And the way that I've done that is either by changing the yarn colour at those specific words, or changing whether I knit or purl. So if you can imagine, that's an I there in the middle, an I. That's the kind of way I was working. So sometimes I had to start recognising, well, I definitely had to start recognising what they look like, so that I could make, you know, an I, an S, all sorts of things. Nice messages to people, statements. Just moving around. Now after 6, I'm going to start doing a little bit of knitting and purling, and I'm going to start on this side now. So we've done 6 rows of knitting, and I'm going to do, well, we'll start purling and we'll see how we get on. Now purling is different. Instead of going this way in like you would a knit, you're going to go this way in. You're almost doing a reverse of a knit, which is what I always feel it's like. And so we're going in, it's like backwards, down towards yourself, in front of the needle this time as well, in front of this needle with all your stitches on. And your yarn still stays in this dominant hand, and you go around your needle like that. So it goes in between the 2 needles. And you pull it round the back instead of the front, but you still have to push it off the top there carefully. So in, around, still anti-clockwise. Pull your stitch onto the other needle and the old stitch off. So into, around, pull your new stitch through and push your old one off, in, around, push your needle down so it pulls that stitch through and takes that one off, in, and a yarn, around, pull it through that way. I'm going to turn the angle now so that you can see it a bit differently. Around there. So my needle comes back up here, but it's got that new stitch on it now. You can tell because if I pull it, if I pull this yarn, you can see that stitch moving, and that's because that is that part of that, and then we've got to push that one off the top there. So back in, around, push it through, got your stitch, push the old stitch off, around, push it down. You see this is where it could hurt your thumb a little bit as well. This one doesn't hurt so much today. Push that off. Last one on this side. Okay, now you won't see much difference now, especially on this side, but let's have a look on that side. Oh yes, so on this side you can start to see how it's flattened it out, and I'm going to put a P here on my book. That was all K, and this is all P, and I've done one P row. I'm going to do another P row now. If I do another purl row, it's probably going to end up looking like this actually. So let me do I'll do another purl and we'll see how it turns out. So this is purling back into the stitch towards me rather than away, in front of this needle. So this needle in front of this needle, the one in the right, in front of the left. Take your yarn over in an anti-clockwise-ish direction and push it up. Take it over with your new stitch on. Just going to keep hold of that little tail. Around. I'm moving my needles too far, sorry. In, around, through the back, pulling that new stitch up, on and off with the old, on and off with the old, in, around, pull it through so it's there, and off with the old. Got a little bit of fluff attached to it, but I'll pull that off in a minute. Okay, there's a little bit of fluff, get rid. So that's me purled again. Interesting how it's going to turn out. I'm going to turn it over and do another 2 purls after I've marked it down. Purl. Just moving my seat. So purl again. Into the stitch backwards, front of the stitch but backwards towards your hand, around, push it through, push your stitches down gently, tug that off the end, in that stitch, around, anti-clockwise around the needle, pull your new stitch up there, push that one off, in, around, pull that through and push that old one off. That's your new stitch, off with the old. You can, of course, fast forward and slow down any bits of this that you want. Keep seeing them again. Find the best bit for you that makes sense. So that's another purl. I'll write that down. So this is 6 knits. And then we've got 3 purls going up here. So one has made a nice flat and then the other one has made a texture, which is what's going to happen if we keep knitting and purling. That's my tension on the end, gone a bit weird there. Okay, so I'm going to purl again. And off. Push all of that little bit of extra hair off. Oh look, and this time I've gone through the stitch there, look. That's not very good, so I'm going to pull it back out and I'm going to go. I didn't want to go through the wool of the stitch. I want to go into the stitch, but I don't want to go through any of the, you know, I don't want to break the twine up because that makes it very complicated, and sometimes you can make an extra stitch accidentally. So still purling here. Into the stitch, around, push your needle down to get that yarn, push off the old stitch. It all stays together because it's all like a bunch of knots, really. That's what stitches are. They're like really pretty knots. A bit like macrame, I suppose, if you think of that as pretty. Right, there's a pearl. I was going to say, is that a knot in my wool? No, it's just a little bit of excess that is not needed. Mark it down, so that's 4 pearl stitch rows. So from this back here, you can't really tell that I've changed from knitting to purling, but at the front you can really tell because that's gone flat there, and then you've got a pearl, and then you've got a bit of flat coming again. We'll do 2 more and see what happens. Sorry, I've just pushed that. Now then, this is interesting. Whereabouts do I have the yarn? I think it is here, look. If I'm going in from here, I don't want to have the yarn from behind. I want to have it from the front, I think. Yeah. Sometimes we do things so naturally. I've got caught up in some different yarns there, different stitches there. Pearl. And we all use, you know, the needles, hold them differently. We all have slightly different actions. We all learn and gain confidence, and we're better at some bits than the other. Some of my friends are really fast, speedy knitters. I'm a bit of a clunky knitter, but I just keep going. I can do it, you know, and they don't even look at their needles. And yet I've knitted since a child and I still have to look at my needles. What I'm doing, they can watch telly and everything. Okay, so that is number 5. I'm going to do 1 more purl, and then I'm going to do a load of knitting and purling to see what happens then. Well, to show you what happens then. Nearly knitted that then. So purl. Oh, that's a good place to lose your stitch because it makes no difference whatsoever. This thumb is very good here, pushing that through. I know I've just caught a little bit of extra old yarn there, so I'm just going to let that go. Last row of just purling, coming up. It's always worth actually counting that you've still got the same amount of stitches. Should we have a little try? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Perfect. And that's number 6 purl. Now I'm going to purl a row and knit a row. Well, I'm going to knit first actually. So let's knit. So through to the back of the stitch, yarn round, pull your needle through and off, round, pull this stitch up and off, round, so you've got your stitch here, What is this action? This action is coming up and under your old needle, your other needle. Right, so we've got a knit. And now I'm going to purl. So I'm going in backwards. See if we can see the knit. The knit looks quite flat there actually, yeah. Can you see that already? And here on the back of the knit, quite textured. So we're going to look at purl. I wish I had really short knitting needles at this point so that they didn't bang against the table so much. And then I could naturally hold them down for this function, like low, whereas I keep wanting to lift them up because they're so long. You can get short needles, they're great. But if you want to make very big things, you need longer needles. You know, for this size, I could really be using my fingers probably, but that would be a thick stitch. So there we've got the first row of knit and then purl. Knit is a K, not an N, Deborah. So we knitted and then purled, and we get this nice flatness creating here. So we're gonna I did forget to write down my purl. So we're gonna knit. Fingers here, actually here, it's very important you kind of pull out your wool, and so that your stitch is more revealed, and the tension kind of help, you know, you're helping the tension and it's revealing your stitch, and then you go round, you're pushing it off. So yeah, your finger and your thumb here are very important. Okay, so there was a knit. What I'm going to do now is knit P, KP, KP, and every time I do one I'm going to write KP, KP so that I know that I'm doing the right amount and in the right order. So now we're going to purl. I'm going to throw that out a little bit because it helps if it's not in view so much, but also nice and loose so that it's not catching on. It's not pulling on your knitting. That doesn't feel or look right, but I'm sure it will when I pull this out here. That looks better. And again, finger and thumb, pull that space down to allow you into that stitch. Pull it down, allows you in. Oh, and when that happens, just do that. And if you're not happy at all, take it back. Go back with just your one. Back in. That was a knit. And then we're going to do a purl. Look at that. So there you get, if you knit, purl, knit, if you knit a row, purl a row, knit a row, purl a row, you get this lovely flatness. This is knitting throughout, purling throughout. So all of knitting, purling, and then this is knit a row, purl a row. We're going to go in with a purl. Is that right? Okay, purling. I'll soon find out if I've done this wrong because it'll have a line across it. Can't believe that I could be just doing this on recording and I've just totally forgotten. that actually, even with writing it down. Yeah, I think I was supposed to knit a row then, because it's created a texture, so that was an accidental purl. Well, there you go. That's what happens. I should have been able to tell because where this tail is. So that was a purl. I think I've done 2 purls next to each other. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Just having a little stretch, sometimes that's good. And we're knitting. Oh, especially when you're leaning down to work in front of a camera. So now I am going to knit, and you have to bring your yarn over for this one. Purl. So take your yarn over, knit, bring your yarn back to this side, purl. Yarn over, knit, bring it over, purl. Knit, purl, yarn over, knit, yarn back here, purl. Okay, so that was row 1 of knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, and I've put knit, purl times 5 because I know that KP, knit, purl, I did it 5 times. Now because I ended on a purl, I'm going to start on a knit, and I'm hoping that that is what I do. I don't do knit, purl very often. I used to do it a lot more. So that's knit, purl. Oh, get rid of that. Take that over. Take your yarn over, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, back, purl. There's a little bit of something going on at the last bit of that. I feel there's a little tightness in it. I think one stitch has got attached to the other. Now you can start to see how you get these little ridges. So that's number 2. Remember to write it down, Deborah. So we're going to knit, purl again, knit, yarn over, purl, yarn over, yarn back over, and then knit it, yarn back this way, purl it, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, yes, Yes, you can definitely see those lines creating. You can see where that mess is there. There's something happened. It's this wool as well. It's a little bit fuzzy. I thought it was wool as well. It's and it is acrylic, but it feels like wool because it feels quite delicate and you could break it. It's a blackbird going by. So let's do another knit. Pull your yarn over, purl, knit. I'm also getting these into a little bit of a knot here, and there is this little gathering of wool again. There we are. Knit, purl. So yarn over, knit, purl, knit. You don't have to say these words out loud, obviously, when you're doing it, because as well as the click-clacking of the needle, you could drive someone mad with the knit, purl, knit, purl. Oh, I've done something wrong, because that's a purl and a knit, and it should be ending on a purl. So I've gone wrong here somewhere. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Got the right amount of stitches. I just lost concentration throughout, didn't I? So let's take these off. Undo it very gently. And as I undo it very gently, try to catch them from the other side. So there's one. There's one that I'm likely to lose if I don't catch it correctly there. Phew, almost. That's better. Still a little bit of it not on. There we are. Right, you have to be very careful at this point, because if you just pull it really tight, you know, fast, it could unravel everything. So I just want to unravel one stitch at a time, pop it back on, and also because I've knitted and purled and knitted and purled and knitted and purled, I probably won't remember which way around my thread is, my yarn is supposed to look or be. So I'll just have to kind of live with that, really. You can see it's very difficult to get your stitches back on. It is possible, but it's quite difficult as well. It's possible. It's not impossible. It's just difficult. A little bit challenging. But we do like a challenge sometimes, don't we? Let's just check. That is that one there. So really, I want to get that one and then pull that out. If you can do that, that is the best way, is actually pick up your stitch. You can see it's like a collar over the other stitch. That's where I went wrong, actually. And always make sure, and you know that you're in the right, because this yarn is coming this way with you. And look, we've lost that one down there. We don't want to lose that completely. If we do, it will unravel. Sorry, I'm not helping because I'm covering that up a little bit. Even if I grab some of it, I might encourage the rest out of the bit. There we are, that's a good one. And last but not least, I'm going to pick this stitch up, pop it on the needle, pull this, and I can see already that that wants to go over there. Yes, and I would probably say it wants to go there. So mess these up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, look. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've lost a stitch. Oh, look, there it is. So what I can do is open this stitch up here and pop this one into it, or take it back down to a guaranteed 10. Do you think that's the same? No, I think it's another one, another row I've got to get rid of. I don't know whether to keep that one on or not. No, I don't think so. I think it's that one there I want. That's the one. So I'm hopefully going to pick up all these stitches through here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9. Let's find the opening of that stitch. 9. I think that's there. And 10. Yay! Well done, well done. I need a little rest after that. That was hard work. Let's have a look at this side. Yeah, that's not too bad. In a little bit, when we've knitted and purled again, we'll lose the sense that that was really hard. A little sip of my tea. Right, and let's pick it back up. And I also can see that this stitch really needs to be that way around, but I've no idea with the rest of them. I'm just going to go with it. So knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, yarn over, purl, knit, yarn over, purl, knit, yarn back over, purl. What's this? It's just a bit of bagginess. Let's see if we can pull that back together later. Purl, knit, purl. I'm easily distracted. Knit and purl, which is what happened last time. You know, and I'm chatting. So there we go. Knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Now we can make it a real one again because we forgot to cross them out. Okay, so I like to say okay a lot, I've noticed. We're going to do, I think we've done 3 knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl rows, because I think we did 4. I messed one up, 2 up, so took them off, and I've knit, purled, so I think that must be number 4. Number 3, let me have a look. Number 3 that was. So we're going to knit, yarn over, purl. Oh, that's not very good, is it? Let's try and make that stitch hole, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. And every time I say purl, I think of somebody I know called Pearl, but this is P-U-R-L. Pearl, differently spelt, but I do think about the name every time I say it. There we go. Look, we can start to see that it's like a cable. It's like a cable knitting before. I've just been given a little orange. Very tasty. I've got a little bit on my fingers. So, 2 more rows, and then I'm going to show you how to cast off. So knit, purl, knit, purl, ooh, nearly forgot how, yarn back over, knit, purl, knit, purl. I think what I'm discovering when I'm thinking about it in this way, because I learnt when I was a child, so I can't remember how I was taught, but I must have been taught in a very particular manner. Ooh, off my mother. And I think what I'm recognising, it's number 5 row, this is number 6. What I think I'm recognising is that the yarn here has to be, it's almost like, this is one rule for us, is that this needle here in my right hand goes through to the back and the yarn sits at the back to make a knit. But the yarn has to come forward, and this needle is at the forward bit of a purl, so it's in front and the yarn is in front before it goes over. So to the back for a knit, sorry, I've just nudged the camera, and to the front for a purl. So to the back and through to the back, yarn over, pull through and over, and yarn forward into the front of the stitch, yarn over, pull it through and off with the old, knit, up and over, purl, and also knit. You take your yarn to the back, you go through to the back, yarn over, pull your stitch to the front, purl, yarn to the front into the front of your stitch and take it to the back. Okay, so you can see here that just from knitting and purling you can do lots of things. So we can just knit, and then I think we were just purling, weren't we? Yep. And then we were knitting and purling, and then we were knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, which gives you these cable looks here. I like that you can do that with just a small amount of stitches. Create lots of differences, so you could see that, you know, you might make a sleeve, or you might make a whole front, or you could start adding things. Oh, another thing that we could add here is different colour, but I think we'll start that on the next one. So what I'm going to do now is cast off. So casting off is lovely, it's so simple. that it's so simple that I forget it all of the time, which is strange. But to cast off, we're going to knit 2 stitches. 1, 2. Same standard, just a standard knit stitch. And then we're going to take the first stitch you knitted and take it over the second one you knitted, leaving this one still on this needle. And then we're going to knit the next stitch, knitting, knit. Okay, and we're going to take that stitch and hop it, leapfrog it over that last stitch you've just done. So we're going to knit. I think what I'm missing out in my explanation here is you take this point of the needle here and try and get it under that stitch and leapfrog it over the other stitch. So you've only got 1 stitch left on this needle. And can you see how it's kind of like takes over. So we're going to knit this next stitch and leave it and put it onto this one, but we're going to take this stitch, take it over that other stitch, just leaving that 1 stitch on. You can do this with your hands as well. I'm going to do that now. So we'll knit it in, and I'm going to take this stitch over that first stitch. Well, the last stitch, whichever you want to call it. So there's stitch 2, and we're going to take stitch 1 over stitch 2. There's the next stitch. So we're going to take that stitch over that stitch, leaving that one on. Knit again. Take this stitch over this stitch, leaving it on. Last one, knit it, take this stitch, ooh, I nearly went into a different stitch underneath there. Take this stitch over that stitch, and then you're just left with your last one. So what I do is look for some scissors that aren't here. So I'm going to rip this and I'm going to push it through that hoop and pull it tight. Not too tight, not like, oh, I kind of want to make sure this tension's good first, and then you can pull it tight, and then that stops all of it unravelling. There's a little sample. Knitting, purling, knitting and purling, different rows, and knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, casting off, and a little bit of casting on at the bottom. That'll do us for now.